Music history is full of stories about our favorite artists, famous studios, and the technology used to create timeless albums that shaped our lives. As a musician, I've always been fascinated by the way we record sound. And with so much technology at our fingertips today, it's easy to forget there was ever a time when recording music was not an everyday commodity. I'm on my way to meet someone with a few stories of his own about his time working for a company that revolutionized recording, NEVE Electronics. Founded by Rupert Neve in the early 1960s, the company built some of the world's most sought-after recording consoles. Those big desks full of knobs and switches that we see our favorite artists use in the studio. NEVE is one of the big names that changed history, and those huge consoles have almost become mythical components of recording studios. Their earliest models were mostly designed for broadcast, but it was through music recording that NEVE gained its legendary status. The legacy speaks for itself. Artists like The Police, David Bowie, Dire Straits, and John Lennon all recorded through NEVE consoles. Damn the Torpedoes, one of my favorite albums by Tom Petty, owes its sound to the NEVE board from Sound City Studios in Los Angeles. In an interview with NPR, Dave Grohl said that what comes out from a NEVE console is this bigger, better version of you. And so it makes you sound real, but it makes you sound really good. Lots of modern companies we love have tried to recreate the classic NEVE sound, but there's nothing quite like being part of a company that actually came up with it all. Steven Sutherland has kindly agreed to tell us more about his days as an engineer at NEVE, helping design custom consoles for some of Britain's top music producers. You were around at an incredible time in music. How do you feel about that?
It was a great privilege. It was a wonderful time. There was so much creativity, and my personal musical tastes were sort of people like the Incredible String Band, Pink Floyd, the Beatles, obviously. There were people like Planxty and the Chieftains.
Oh, that's lovely. I love Planxty.
Yes.
Clannad.
Clannad, indeed.
Amazing.
Yes.
You once told me the story about an invention of yours that earned you the nickname of the guy with the cardboard amplifier. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, indeed. In those days, there were magazines, and there was like Wireless World, and they published circuit diagrams, and there was one issue that had a very low noise amplifier. In those days, the Tottenham Court Road in London was filled with shops that sold components, and you could buy anything you wanted and make up your own circuit. So I built my own circuit that had a signal to noise ratio of like 109 dB.
Which is very low.
Extremely low. I mean, but you just can't hear the noise. And so when I went to university, I had this amp, and I just put it in a sort of wooden cigar box or something, and the front panel, I just used a piece of cardboard and wrote on it in hand. And this got christened the cardboard amp by everybody, but it was sort of superb quality, you know.
Do you still have it?
I probably do, in the attic somewhere. Yes, I'm not quite sure where, but
you should rescue it for sure.
I should. In the early 1980s, I got a job with NEVE Electronics. Almost everybody who worked there, maybe they were in a band, they played some instrument, they all had a love of music, and because NEVE became known as like the Rolls-Royce of mixing desks, and this was due to very much everything was built on quality. We were building professional equipment, so it had to be rugged and reliable. when I worked there, we had NEVE 1, which was his very first mixer, which was a long thing with, I think it had 5 massive black knobs the size of your hand. This was before faders. They were rotary. That was it, really.
I'm hoping my time with Steven will reveal more about the magic behind the NEVE sound after reviewing some of the classics recorded on these consoles.
I think perhaps the purity of it. There was so much you could do with the equalization and the bands suited to different instruments and things. Nowadays, you can do almost anything with sound, but in those days you were limited a lot by the equipment, and I think it brought out a lot of creativity in producers. I think it was a sort of symbiotic relationship really between the equipment and the producers and the engineers, that they could do more with sound.
Steven had the opportunity of working for a number of producers and musicians. He remembers his time with Mike Oldfield on Tubular Bells, where the English musician played about 80 different instruments, all by himself, running into a 24-track machine.
He wanted to pick up an instrument, say at the beginning of a section of music, drop it, pick up another instrument, and he wanted all the settings, all the equalization settings and gain settings and everything that had been preset for each instrument, just to change automatically. And another thing that NEVE developed was a thing called NECAM, which was motorized faders. So one person could do a very complicated mix. It didn't involve having lots of people doing
all over the faders
at the time.
What would you say was a major challenge you had to overcome during your time at NEVE?
It was a long time learning the technicalities. I mean, they're very complicated. Another of the producers I worked with was Frank Farian, who was a German producer behind Boney M and Milli Vanilli. And so he used a lot of electronics to produce the sound he wanted. Hopefully you'd done it all correct on paper and you didn't get too many problems once they started actually building it. But if you'd made mistakes and unforeseen things, people would come back at you. And luckily, I didn't get too many repercussions.
One of Steven's most remarkable stories is about working on a design for the man who produced the Beatles, Sir George Martin. He had teamed up with fellow producers Ron Richards, John Burgess, and Peter Sullivan to establish their own company, Associated Independent Recordings. And in 1970, when he decided to open Air Studios in central London, George Martin approached Rupert Neve for a custom console. He later established another studio, but this time on the Caribbean paradise island of Montserrat. This is where Dire Straits recorded their massive hit Money for Nothing with Sting as part of the Brothers in Arms album, though that wasn't the only one. Montserrat inspired a plethora of unbelievable records, ranging from Jerry Rafferty's Snakes and Ladders and Elton John's Too Low for Zero, all the way to Synchronicity by The Police and Faces by Earth, Wind and Fire. The studios were fitted with a NEVE console that our friend Steven worked on as a junior member of the team.
The idea was to have the biggest bands in the world coming to the island and spending time in the studio without distractions, without all the media and the fans. They could, like when he was in the studio with the Beatles, just to spend maybe a week or 2 weeks in the studio. And
what do you think was particularly special about that one from Air Montserrat?
George Martin was very hands-on technically. He knew exactly how everything worked and got very involved with the engineering and the technicality. And because George Martin, known as the man with golden ears, he was always striving to get the best of everything, and he specified everything had to be exactly how he wanted it.
What was your first impression of him
remarkable man. I mean, he was completely dedicated to the music and creativity and how to achieve it.
There's a funny story at how the Beatles would call him the schoolmaster, because he had this very sort of imposing, well, chaps, okay.
Very English.
Yeah, very English indeed. Sadly, the life of Air Studios in Montserrat was cut short when tragedy struck the volcanic island.
Swirling cloud pattern as it crosses the Atlantic.
Canada sent soldiers to help out.
Hurricane Hugo hit Montserrat halfway through September of 1989. According to the University of the West Indies, nearly every home in Montserrat was destroyed or heavily damaged, leaving 11,000 of the island's 12,000 people homeless. And as if that weren't enough, in July 1995, the island's volcano, Soufriere Hills, erupted after centuries of dormancy. The disaster left 4/5 of Montserrat uninhabitable, depopulating the island from 14,000 to just over 4,000 people, according to a photo essay published by The Guardian. Added to the human tragedy, George Martin's studio was in utter disrepair.
It's very sad, really, because the amount of effort that had gone into trying to do this, it all sort of suddenly came to an end. I mean, they rescued the mixing desks, and they're still in use now. Obviously, it must have involved a lot of remedial work, because volcanic dust just gets everywhere. Everything must have had to come out and be thoroughly cleaned.
It must be a great testament to your work that, you've got a console that survived a volcanic eruption and a hurricane in the Caribbean.
This is true, yes. This is true. I mean, it's good to know that they're still in use, because they're probably the most sophisticated desks that NEVE ever built. Of course, when we worked there, we used to call it Montserrat.
Why was that?
Well, just for fun. When you're working on things every day, you think of an amusing name for it.
I imagine you must feel proud of having contributed so much to music history. What does that make you feel like, to realize that you were a big part of that?
Oh, I enjoyed it very much, because as I say, almost everybody who worked there loved music, and you should have seen some of the music systems people had in their cars, all the multi-band sort of equalizers and things people fitted to their car stereos. I think that contributed a lot to it being a good place to work, because it was more of it wasn't just a job to earn money, it was more vocational. I've been very lucky to have worked in exciting fields in technology, yes.
We often remember the songs, the voices, and the records that shaped our lives. But behind those moments, there are stories like Steven's. Stories of people we never see, who helped shape the way we hear sound. So perhaps, next time we put on our favorite record, we might hear a little bit more than just the music. Yeah, that one's going to be easier to...
I could ask her to turn it down or off.
As George Harrison used to say, we'll bury it in the mix.
Travelling Wilbury.